Welcome back to Get the Check. I'm Maya.
I'm Monica.
I'm Priya.
And today we have a fun news story lineup. First, we have TSMC pledging $100 billion to U.S. chip facilities. Next, we have the release of Claude 3.7 Sonnet. And finally, Trump announced the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. But to get into the TSMC story first, TSMC pledged $100 billion over the next 4 years. They are going to be creating 3 new chip manufacturing plants in Arizona, 2 advanced packaging facilities, and 1 R&D center. And the total commitment now to the U.S. is $165 billion, including their previous $65 billion in investment. They've also received up to $6.5 billion in federal funding from the CHIPS Act to facilitate this project.
Yeah, so basically they develop chips that then get sold to a bunch of different companies like NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Apple, Broadcom, all of these different things. So it's not only like GPU specific or AI specific. They also go into like all of our phones, all of our computers, everything like that.
And defense tech.
Yeah. And they don't actually design anything themselves. So they basically just like take the designs from all of these different like chip makers and then like actually manufacture it for them.
So they're purely just the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they do have their own fabrication technology that's like way more precise than anyone else can get it. So it's not like they have nothing.
Which is why they make like 60% of the world's semiconductors and 90% of the world's advanced chips. So they're a huge deal for the global supply chain. And they are based out of Taiwan, where they're 25% of Taiwan's GDP. So they're kind of like the company that defines Taiwan's overall global positioning. So I think we should talk about why it's so important for the U.S. to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to America. Obviously, we always want to bring manufacturing back, but since this chip is so critical to our defense tech and our phones, it's a way bigger deal. And we saw during COVID a little bit of what can happen when there's disruption to the supply chain because of global events and there's nothing that we can do domestically to produce them.
So traditionally, U.S. facilities cost 37 to 50% more than those in China. And so it's always not economical to ever create a U.S. manufacturing plant. And so the shift has really gone from U.S.-based manufacturers to Taiwan and Chinese-based manufacturers for these types of chips.
Yeah, but it's really just like a power play because to Annika's earlier point, like you want to be able to control the supply chain if there is ever a disruption. And with Taiwan, that's like especially top of mind. And so I think that's why it's like so important that we do have like some leverage and some control over these chips being made.
And it's been a bipartisan push, although Biden and Trump went about it in different ways. So Biden prioritized the CHIPS Act, which provides direct subsidies and tax incentives to TSMC to build here. And that's what Maya was referencing in the beginning, where they've already started this Arizona facility and they'd already invested billions. But Trump wants to take a more like tariff-centered approach. So he's criticized the CHIPS Act and he's threatened tariffs of up to 50% on these chips if they don't immediately bring manufacturing.
I was reading a lot about their the different ways that they pushed for bringing silicon chip manufacturing back to the U.S. People on X want to like basically promote like the president that they like and say it's all because of that one person. So some people will be like, okay, this is all because of Trump, like because of Trump's executive orders and the tariffs that he's imposing, TSMC is finally doing it. And it's like, well, no, because Biden already committed funding and they're actually using that funding and they've already created an Arizona plant. And so they've already gotten the ball rolling. Yeah. And so I just like find it funny that people will use anything to say, oh, this administration is way better than the last.
I also like don't know what they're going to do because Trump is basically saying that he's going to like discontinue like the CHIPS Act and he's going to like cancel it basically.
Yeah.
But they've already given out so much money that's having so much economic impact, like not only for TSMC, but also for like Micron and like other players as well, who's bringing like 50,000 jobs to New York. And so it's like, I don't understand what the play forward is.
Does Trump have like an actual critique of the CHIPS Act, or is it just that he doesn't want to be giving like foreign companies money?
He just doesn't want to be.
That's basically it.
That is what it is. The other thing is that he when he says he's going to terminate it, what people don't realize is like they have to go through Congress because the CHIPS Act is protected by Congress.
And it had like huge bipartisan support when it got passed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he can't initiate like an executive order or create one to basically cancel the CHIPS Act. And he knows that he's not going to get it pushed through Congress. So he just like makes these claims. And if you don't know anything about the story, you're going to believe them.
One question I do have to play devil's advocate is, do you think that the investment would have been $100 billion if it hadn't been for Trump's threat of tariffs? Like, do you guys think that that threat increased the amount they're willing to invest at all?
I think this goes into the point of like why TSMC is also motivated to bring manufacturing into the US. And it's really because TSMC is a private company and is not necessarily the government of Taiwan.
It's not at all the government of
It's
Taiwan.
not.
Like it's not like the way like ByteDance and China might have a relationship because China has control over private industry because Taiwan's a democracy.
Right.
Well, it's
I'm
like
not saying
the
this
same
right.
way like Apple does with our U.S. government. Like,
yeah,
it's not any different than...
It's honestly even more like economical than ethical because like they've already built all their infrastructure and they've already trained all the workers.
Yeah, it's economical and ethical, but I also think that like obviously if you're the CEO of a company and you're from Taiwan, or a large majority of your employee base is from Taiwan, you support that government, right?
Yeah.
But okay, at the end of the day, it is a private entity. It is not a public entity and does not have to serve the government of Taiwan. And so it's in their best interest to actually decentralize their manufacturing facilities, put them in Germany, put them in US, so that if Taiwan were to ever go underseas, they could still make money.
And I think that's like the really big part of it that you like super casually said, which is like Taiwan could like literally get invaded by China. So I think that's the geopolitical significance for this, which China has been saying that they want to reunify Taiwan for a really long time, even though they've never owned Taiwan. And they do a variety of things to basically threaten Taiwan. Like in December of last year, the PLA, which is like their army, carried out a military operation around Taiwan, which was said to like simulate what a blockade of Taiwan could be like, and it was the most aggressive tactic since like 1996.
The U.S. also stopped China from accessing Taiwan's chips at the end of last year. I think it was like in December. So it's like more and more reasons piling on top of each other.
I think the probability of China invading Taiwan is low just because the cost of war in the modern day is so high. But I think that if there's ever been a chance, it is right now, because you have a combination of the fact that experts have always said that China's military will be ready around 2025, which we're in 2025 now. And then I think 2027 is China's military or something's like 100-year anniversary they always talk about. And they always say they like want Taiwan reunified by then. And then I feel like if there's ever a president that would like turn a blind eye to China reunifying Taiwan, it would only be Trump.
Yeah. I would also say the player that loses the most in this deal is Taiwan, because their like economic moat is being diversified to other countries. And so to your point, that it just increases risk that they get invaded. It doesn't help them in any way.
But it's not just their economic moat, it's also like their military moat, like their military defense protection, because like Taiwan isn't so we have like our nuclear umbrella of like of countries where we say like NATO countries, where it's like if you invade a NATO country, like we will like fight back. And Taiwan is not one of those, but it's been like an informal thing that we extend to Taiwan, where it's like we don't say we'll help them, but it's kind of understood that we probably would because of like what's called the Silicon Shield. But this is like taking that away. And I wouldn't say like the US and Taiwan have like a super strong cultural connection the way we might with like NATO nations, but we do have like Taiwan still has like strategic importance in like that area of the world.
Yeah. And someone from the Taiwanese government, like when they were asked about TSMC and like the whole deal that's happening, they said that the more TSMC produces in the US, the lower Taiwan's geopolitical importance it will be, and the incentive that the US has to help Taiwan in the future. I feel like they're being super open about this as well, from like the perspective of like when you move things to the United States, like the US is just going to care about protecting us less because they don't need us the way that we have previously.
I do think that the worry or concern that this puts Taiwan at more of a risky state of potentially getting invaded by China is a little bit overblown, because if you look at the actual manufacturing capacity that TSMC's new pledge adds, it's not by much. So basically, right now, the current initial Arizona fab manufactures 20K wafers a month. And this is 1.3% of Taiwan's monthly capacity. So even with 3 more US fabs of this size, you basically increase the needle by like single-digit percentages. And if more than 90% of TSMC's manufacturing capacity is like still in Taiwan, I don't think the risk is actually that much more increased. I think it's just like the sentiment around the news story in general and what it signifies and the economic impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. They also did say that they are still leaving their most advanced tech in Taiwan. Like they've explicitly said they're not going to bring it to the United States.
Yeah.
So I see your point. I just think it's like made up of a ton of different factors.
Because it's like China has always had a threat of invading Taiwan, even if they have all of the if they have the silicon shield and all of this chip manufacturing. So it's like the more it gets diversified away, that's just like one more factor. But then there's so many other factors where like Trump is probably a good time to invade. And I feel like it was interesting, and we should talk about like the Zelensky clip. Everyone's been talking about like the way that Trump and Vance treated Zelensky, and I have to imagine like China is watching that clip thinking like, oh, like the US doesn't give a fuck about, like, if the US doesn't give a fuck about Ukraine, which is like on the border of NATO, why would we care about Taiwan?
And that's kind of the concern that the neighboring countries would have too, like the Philippines, Guam, all of those places. Like if Taiwan hypothetically like were to fall, like what's to say that we would like continue to protect anyone else?
Yeah, like Trump and Vance basically just like embarrass Zelensky, and we're like, you're completely dependent on the US, and if we feel like it, we'll just pull all of our aid. Like we don't really care. They were basically like, get on your knees to Zelensky.
No, it was insane.
And it's funny because like, okay, I saw a lot of people on X being like, Trump and Vance are right, like Trump supporters, and it's like, okay, no shit, like obviously without our help Ukraine would be like in the gutter, but it's like
the way you
that's
go
not
about
the
it.
point.
Yeah.
Like, also if you're like Putin watching that, like you're like, oh, like there's a decent, like you just see that the US doesn't really care.
I feel like Vance is Trump's little watchdog and just sits on the porch and just goes like,
Wait, the Vance memes on X right now are out of hand.
But yeah, there is one stat that I wanted to say. Classically, we've always known that the demand versus supply in the U.S. for these like semiconductor chips has been unbalanced. So, for example, American companies account for 48% of global semiconductor sales, but U.S. fabrication only produces 12% of the world chips, and this is down from 37% in the 90s.
Was that
But
like
I also
Intel, or
think-
who was the producer?
I think it's more that way more is being produced in Taiwan, not necessarily like we've
Who
shut down.
are the
But I
US?
also think you have to look at like what's being produced, because like at the time the amount of like semiconductors that we needed were like so little. Like phones basically didn't even I mean, obviously they existed, but not to the capacity that they did today.
The U.S. just has not grown in manufacturing capacity while Taiwan has like exploded.
Yeah.
The question I was going to ask is, in your guys' research, did you see anywhere at what point the U.S. would be like chip independent? Like, you know how we say we'll be like energy independent by a certain year?
There's no point. That's what I was saying earlier. Like, U.S. is not going to double their manufacturing capacity.
And also it's like we're going to continue to use more chips in AI. Like I feel like now that like that whole sector has exploded. And so it's like it's exponentially increasing alongside this like production increasing.
If the U.S. can't achieve chip independence, I have to believe that they're still going to protect Taiwan. I don't think that like economically there is a near time future where we can sustain without them, which is like pretty evident by the all the news reports and stuff. And so like while it increases the risk slightly for Taiwan, I don't think it dramatically changes the story.
I mean, I think we all agree on that. I think it's just like sentiment in Taiwan. Like if you were living there, obviously it's scary that
it's
you're
not
like moving. Yeah.
And like the people of Taiwan have formed like more of a national identity over time, and the amount of people in Taiwan that want to be reunified with China is only going down. So they're kind of just like on an island, like hoping for the best.
Yeah,
literally.
I wanted to finish your conversation around would TSMC have pledged $100 billion if it weren't for Trump? And my answer is like, it is hard. It's hard to say. Like, I don't know if it's $100 billion. I think they always had like intentions to. They might have just like jacked up the number just to keep Trump a little bit more happy.
I agree. Like that's kind of what I don't think it's even just to keep Trump a little bit more happy. I think it's like when you have a threat of tariffs, if you were debating doing something that's like in favor of the US government, like you're probably going to do it. Like I don't think you'd maybe make it up out of thin air. But I think that's like what the whole Trump camp is like been arguing this whole time. It becomes difficult because it's like tariffs are a really bad economic policy, and although using tariffs as a threat seems to at least be working in certain cases, at the end of the day, if all of this ends up being empty threats, like eventually countries will just stop. Like I feel like right now they're doing it because like no one knows if it's an empty threat or not. But this isn't like a strategy that works forever, which is why no one else has done it.
The other thing that has been pretty critiqued by this news story is that people say moving TSMC to United States will greatly reduce their competitiveness because producing chips in Taiwan cost half or even lower than the United States. And that's actually false. I wanted to debunk this claim on the pod because if you look at the earnings call, they've stated multiple times that the yield is very comparable to the Arizona factories. And yield is like a very huge deal in the manufacturing plants. It's just like how effective is your manufacturing plant? And so you want to make sure that these plants are just as effective as the Taiwan facilities. And their operating costs are only 30% higher, which is due to importing materials. So the whole thing with the TSMC factories is that like there is a bunch of like you have to make the factory, right? And that is a whole supply chain in and of itself, and it exists entirely in Taiwan. So moving that over to the US is like not easy to do. Sure, you can build a facility in the US, but then you have to import all the shit into the US because like the parts don't exist in the US, if that makes sense. So that 30% comes there. But the US has also given tax advantages. I think there's like an incentive of 25% will be forgiven in tax if for all like manufacturing equipment to kind of help that and combat that cost. So basically, yes, it is 30% more expensive, but it's truly due to the imports. And this is expected to go down as they start to manufacture more in the US.
That makes sense. So basically, to summarize, Taiwan still faces a low risk of invasion of China, but obviously this isn't preferable for Taiwan, but it's really good for the US. It's really good for TSMC, and it might even be good for China depending on what their plans are. Okay, so moving on to Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which came out. It is Anthropic's most intelligent model to date, and it is designed to exhibit step-by-step reasoning. So that's similar to what we saw with DeepSeek, and even like GPT now, where it'll show you like the thinking that it's going through before it gives you the answer.
Yeah, so it's a hybrid reasoning model. And so because of this, you can get both like quick answers that you expect a lot of the time when you're using something like ChatGPT. But then when you have those more complex issues, complex tasks at hand, you can use their extended thinking time. And so it'll basically just like continue to reprompt until it gets closer to like a more correct answer, whatever we want to call that more correct answer. And so that's how it displays like both qualities in one model.
Yeah, and if you're using the API, you can directly control how long you want the model to think for.
Yeah, this is one of the first prominent examples of the unified model architecture, which OpenAI and Anthropic have been saying that they're going to go for. OpenAI plans to also go for a unified model in GPT-5. But in order to understand really what a unified model is, I think we have to take a step back and talk about the differences between the reasoning models and the foundational models and how we even got here in the first place, and why OpenAI comes out with GPT 4.0 versus o1 versus like o3. Like what are truly the differences in these models? So to start us off, like foundational models, they're these large AI systems that are pre-trained on vast data sets, and they're essentially really good at pattern recognition across very diverse data. And so they're good at content generation. They're also really good at handling diverse and undefined tasks due to their very general training. And then the idea is that this is the base foundational model that kind of serves for any fine-tuned model on top of it, where you might train a fine-tuned model for a specific application use, like coding, or for example, doing this financial model that you want to like adjust the inputs on an Excel spreadsheet. And so you would train a smaller model to be more efficient on that one type of problem.
Okay, so that makes sense for foundational models. And then how are reasoning models different?
So they're typically built on top of the foundational model. So you can think of this as like originally O1, and then OpenAI came out with O3 after that, which is a successor of O1. These are all reasoning models. They're specifically used for complex problem solving. So you can think about like very formulaic type of questions and answers. Hey, what does this statement mean? It'll kind of be able to break that apart and like teach you that. And so these reasoning models are really good at like logical reasoning, essentially. Like, why does this happen the way it does?
So like when you're coding, for example, in like that use case, I know a lot of software engineers will like ask questions to like Claude or OpenAI or whoever it is. Do you traditionally use a reasoning model in that scenario?
Yes, because you want it to like understand like why you're doing the code you're doing and like the logical process of that. It basically significantly outperforms foundational models on tasks that require like 5 or more reasoning steps. So like things that take a longer time to get to the answer, where you have to do first, you have to solve this problem and this problem and this problem. Like if you think in a mathematical proof, you have to solve or prove this one thing to then solve the next thing to solve the next thing. And like reasoning models are really good at that like chain of thought reasoning versus foundational models are really good at just like generating huge blocks of content after a prompt.
What I've heard is that you can also go down like multiple different paths and explore those different paths until it gets to like the most correct version of the answer, as opposed to foundational models, which to your point, just like find the first thing and respond with it.
Exactly. And so now making two models, like this like foundational model versus this reasoning model, is quite hard. Like you have to have twice the amount of budget to like one, make the foundational model, and then two, also make the reasoning model, because it's like a separate model trained on top of a model. And so you have to like go through pre-training, post-training, all these different steps. And so and then you also have to host these two models. It's just essentially like, why are we doing both of these things if we can get one model that solves both of these problems?
And like the user has to decide which one is the right model for their use case. So it's like a worse user experience as well. So like everyone's losing. I think obviously the big concern was if the reasoning ability of the model going to be lower, but Anthropic showed that they were able to do it without that being the case. Like I know that when you look at the benchmarks with this new model, it was said to be like more of a nudge forward than a leap.
Yeah, this is like the first model that I think was intended to be designed with usefulness rather than just intelligence and jumping and beating the bar of like previous intelligence models. So what I mean by this is 3.7 has been known to be very good at actually just like executing the tasks that people want them to do, and specifically in the coding environment. And this is because it has a larger output capacity, so you can like actually have it like generate way more files than you originally could with like 3.5, for example. And it's really modeled with the intention of being good for like agentic use, because they know that the AI industry is moving towards agentic applications and like async work, and not just synchronous work where you're like asking a question and getting an answer, but you're like letting it go off and do its own thing. And so I think like I think Anthropic realized that, and they were like, okay, instead of pushing the boundaries on intelligence and trying to beat all of those type of benchmarks, which they didn't, right? They're still like second in language, for example. They really tried to push the boundaries in like agentic work. And I think that's just a sign of the industry moving towards like usefulness rather than general intelligence. Because they always like want to reach AGI, but it's like maybe we don't care to reach AGI that fast, and we actually care to like build models really good for applications on the foundational layer itself.
I mean, I think they're like both two things that we care about, but to your point, like with the release of this, they also released Claude Code. And so that just like proves that they want these models to be useful to us. So I guess like as a software engineer, I don't know if you've tried it out versus like Cursor or any of the other tools on the market, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the difference is that Claude Code is just not in the IDE format. So if you're like comfortable with using terminal, it is definitely way better. I also saw some tweets from the Cursor team, because the Cursor team also integrates these models into the Cursor stack, and
they did it like immediately. They did it the same day.
Yeah, I mean, this is very normal.
Yeah.
They might have access to the release earlier or something.
They definitely
like
do,
yeah. And Perplexity does this, for example. But what the people said was that originally the feedback from integrating 3.7 was that it's like not really that much better, because like in Cursor, like people couldn't really feel the difference. And it was actually because of like the way Cursor was designed. So Cursor was designed for very synchronous work, where you like ask a question, get an answer, apply changes. Ask a question, get an answer, apply changes. Versus like Claude 3.7 also has like a whole version of like async work, where you're like, go do this. And like Cursor has to kind of redesign the IDE environment to now support async tasks, for it to actually be very useful. And I think that's really the difference between like Claude Code and like Cursor. It's the way you use and feel it, and the model underneath really dictates that kind of feeling.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys saw the timeline on Anthropic's website, but they said like by 2027, they think that their models will be able to identify and solve complex problems that would take teams years to do totally on their own.
Yeah. And this is where they're really focusing on inference time computation. So what this means is like when the user asks the question or tells the prompt or whatever, spend more time thinking. Basically, spend more time on thinking tokens, which is this extended thinking time, and then maybe do a multi-pass consensus algorithm on top of it, where like ask this question like multiple times and see like what's the most common response from all of these like prompts, essentially, to get to like the true best answer. Because the idea is that like the answer exists in these models, it just might take some time to like pull it out, and that might be through both extending the thinking time and like having more thinking tokens, or also doing a multi-pass consensus algorithm. And Claude 3.7 basically unlocks the ability to do so, and the developer can kind of choose your own adventure and figure out, okay, do I want more thinking time? Do I have the budget for all of this? And so what they're also doing is they're transferring the budget kind of from Anthropic to the developer, if you think about it. Because
that makes sense.
Originally you would spend you still spend a lot of money on pre-training, but now they're saying, okay, like on inference time money, like it's up to you on how much you want to use.
It's like more, no, that makes sense. And I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, with just a couple prompts I was able to create like a fully functioning video game and like it looks really good. And is that because they can just like up the thinking time compared to before?
Yeah, it's just like like basically telling a student like try harder.
No, that makes sense.
And it's so funny, like what I keep coming back to with like building in the AI space is like you really just want to mimic what we're already doing with our lives. Like you want to mimic what a brain already does. And so like extended thinking time is like I said, like going back to a student and being like, try harder, try again, or like spend more time on the problem.
Like do more research. It's literally like doing more research, trying a bunch of different things out, and then like seeing where you get.
Yeah. It's honestly really interesting how that works, because I feel like when I first started using ChatGPT, like in my head, my assumption was like it's trying its hardest because it's not a person.
Yeah.
Like why would like an AI be lazy?
Be optimized.
Yeah. And the second part is that them going after a unified model approach actually like mimics a brain much more closely, because like you don't have like two brains where you're like, I'm gonna ask the reasoning brain this and the foundational brain this. It's just like based on the question, you do this like implicit calculus of like, how much time should I spend on answering this question? Should I go research a little bit more, right? And what they're trying to do is mimic this in the AI models. So like OpenAI has said in GPT-5, they're going to try to put the task of figuring out how much time to spend on the model itself and have the model decide, versus Anthropic is letting still the developers decide.
Yeah, and I think that's the way forward that like all of these companies will move in, just because like from an end user experience to like what you were saying earlier, Annika, like it's so much easier to use. Like most people don't even know what ChatGPT is. There's no way you know what model to pick when you're like asking a question. And I feel like that's something where you expect them to know. It's like, you tell me, like you're gonna know better than I'm gonna know.
Yeah, and I think it really depends at what layer do you want to abstract that thinking away. So like, do you want to give developers the control to then build the applications to make those decisions, or do you want to bake those decisions directly into the model, if that makes sense?
I feel like it's like over time you make it directly into the model.
I think that'll make developers really unhappy though.
I actually don't know. Like I actually think that developers don't know, and also researchers don't know which way to go. Like if the model autonomy is truly going to work and lead to like more inefficiencies and errors, or actually just like better performance. And we have to wait till the GPT-5 release to be able to tell.
My hypothesis would be that at like a consumer level of like us using it, we would prefer them to choose what we're using. But at a developer level, I still think that they would prefer to choose which model and like eval them against each other, test them against each other. Like maybe it is worth it to us to use like the extra money and like get this answer out of it, but maybe it's not. And that's like a business decision. That's not a answer decision.
And it is worth noting that companies are obviously using AI for a variety of use cases, right? Like for example, Harvey AI, which we're doing an interview with soon, they have talked a lot about how benchmarks are not applicable to them because like they have this very specific use case of like for lawyers. So they might like test out these models and then end up with a different result than what like OpenAI or like a foundational model company would overall think.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, who knows?
But like in theory, if they knew what you were using it for, they could like put that into their calculation of what's ideal. Cause like you would give the input of, this is what I'm looking for, this is the price I'm willing to pay, like all of these different things. So I feel like it's tricky. Like I think it could go either way.
I see what you're saying, but I feel like the amount of time that like Harvey AI would spend evaluating a model, or like whether it's a company or a specific model type for their use case, is like always going to be more well thought out than like what OpenAI would decide with like their input, right? Because they have like an entire team of people just working on that.
I honestly think I would, if I was like Harvey or even just like any consumer, I would want a hybrid approach where like the first time I ask the question, the model autonomously decides whether it's going to spend like 5 seconds or 20 seconds. And then if I truly wanted to, I could like up it. I think you would always want to up it for example, like let's say you ask a question and it spent too much time and you're frustrated, then it's like, how do you can't like give that time back to the consumer. So like that's the tough part about autonomy is like would be good if it like errs on the side of like less time than more, and then you have like the option to like basically increase the thinking time.
Everyone at X is talking about like vibe coding and like being able to prompt something with like a few things and then it'll just like create the video game or create the application. And like how much of that is related to this release versus not?
It's like not really, because people have been doing that for a while now, but it's just like with every release in this case, like because the coding capabilities are so good, it'll like continue to get better and better.
It's because the output capacity is like 15 times
better.
more than 3.5. Like
it's like just more. It's not better. It's just more.
It's just more.
Like
yeah.
it's allowed to output more than it was before.
Yeah, and so
What does that mean?
like more
Like instead
lines
of like
code.
100 lines, it's like 200 lines.
Yes. And so like that makes a pretty big difference in the developer experience. I think it like unlocks more tasks. In the beginning it used to be like, okay, like just fix these like 30 lines for me. But now I can be like, okay, just like rewrite the framework for these 30 files, which is like a considerable amount of like hours done that is just busy work in any software engineer's life. And so I do think it is a very material difference.
Maybe one day none of us will be writing code anymore.
I already don't write code. It's okay, don't tell my company that.
This is going on the internet.
Oh, fuck.
Cool. So moving on to the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, Trump signed an executive order that created two things. So it was a Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, and then it was a digital asset stockpile. And this is something that has been going back and forth for a long time now on whether this is something we need. We actually talked about it in our Coinbase episode that we recorded.
Shout out, go watch that episode.
That was a fun episode.
Yeah, so if you've been keeping up, you might have known about this news months before it happened.
But you know what has the least amount of views? Like our Coinbase episode.
Yeah, I thought that was SpaceX.
Yeah, it's not Coinbase. Coinbase is like one of our highest.
I actually really liked that episode. No, I like personally really liked Coinbase. It was so fun to learn about crypto. I just love crypto. Okay.
I
Anyways.
just love crypto. Okay.
Back to the topic at hand.
So I guess like why people think that we should have a Bitcoin strategic reserve is because the federal government has accumulated around 400,000 Bitcoin over the past decade. And the way that they're accumulating this is through civil or criminal asset forfeitures. So they're not buying it on their own or anything like that. It's like things that have been seized or for whatever reason the government is now in control of. So previously we didn't necessarily have a strategy on what to do with this. And so in the current state, it's estimated that we have around 200,000 Bitcoin remaining. That number is like, we don't know that for sure. And I think one of the things with this executive order is that we are going to go audit and see what we have.
Yeah, like there were agencies that were tasked with overseeing what we had, like the IRS, the SEC, but it was like super discombobulated.
Well, because like for the longest time, they didn't even recognize it as like a real thing. So
I think what this executive order is that it puts in place that the US is like pro Bitcoin essentially. And maybe it's just that the Trump administration is pro Bitcoin.
I get what you're saying, and I don't even disagree. I just think like pro Bitcoin is a strong use. I do think like eventually, like I actually agree, like 6 months from now, it'll be clear that the US government is pro Bitcoin and more actions will have been taken. But I think this specific action can't really be extrapolated to that because like Priya said, like this is Bitcoin we already have. And it's from like, for example, when like the Silk Road came down, like we got a bunch of Bitcoin from that and things like that, which is actually kind of funny because then like Trump pardoned the person that like orchestrated that entire thing, which to me is like even more pro Bitcoin than like necessarily this action.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like you could even say that like just electing Trump is making the US more pro Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So the act of the executive order doesn't actually make a pro Bitcoin. It's like if the secretary actually goes and does the budget neutral
starts like hoarding Bitcoin.
Yeah, actually like starts buying and purchasing Bitcoin, then it'll be seen as like more pro Bitcoin.
Yeah, and like to your point though, obviously like you're not going to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve unless you're like pro something. And like historically the reason why you create like a strategic anything reserve as a nation state is because you think that thing is like vital to the economic security and stability of your country. So like for Canada, that's maple syrup. We have like gold.
Yeah. And it's important to talk about like that Bitcoin is specifically the only cryptocurrency in this strategic Bitcoin reserve, like obviously in the name itself.
Yeah, so basically the strategic Bitcoin reserve, like you said, is all Bitcoin. The digital asset stockpile is other cryptocurrencies. And we talk about this in the Coinbase episode, but basically there's been this whole debate within the SEC as to if Bitcoin is a security or a commodity. And this lends itself to seeing Bitcoin as a commodity. It's like commodities that are stockpiled by nation states and reserves. For example, like pork for China, maple syrup for Canada, gold for us, like those are clear commodities. Whereas like the digital asset stockpile, I think they've kept separate because those are still seen as securities, which can be like important for us to have in like a tradable fund, but it's not like a commodity, which is something that you believe has inherent value.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there is like some evidence in the direction of what you're saying, that this is pro Bitcoin, because the US government has kind of skirted ever admitting that Bitcoin has inherent value the way that this does.
And it's like signaling that they want to long-term preserve this asset. Because even in the executive order, they were literally like, the reason we're doing this is because Bitcoin is a scarce like coin.
Yeah.
And there's only like limited amount of it in the world. And so we want to make sure that like we're building our own position in it.
Yeah, I feel like you had a good point about this when we were talking about it earlier, like about the total global supply of Bitcoin versus like how much we have and how much we could get.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the total like supply of Bitcoin is 21 million Bitcoins that exist today. 1 million of those like haven't been mined yet. 4 million of them have just been like lost forever.
That's crazy.
Which is actually insane because that's such a significant percentage.
It's in the dumpster.
That
guy. We have this video about this guy that threw away his Bitcoin flash drive in like a dumpster, and he's suing
The state of LA or
to go
or the city of
dumpster
LA.
diving.
Yeah, and
That's where the other 4 million are.
and the city's like, no, you can't do this anymore. And he's like, trust me, I'll do it in a very environmental friendly way. And they're like, just like,
The crazy thing is, if I was them, I'd just be like, we're going 50-50 if you find it. Like, you go dumpster diving. Like, we're going 80-20. Like, Mans has, like, no ability to say anything. Like, what? They're just, like, leaving it there?
yeah, I guess they have like leverage. I don't know.
You know who made her first million via Bitcoin? Lucy Guo. Coming soon.
Coming soon.
Oh my God.
She did this interview and it was like, I made my first $1 million in Bitcoin, but I lost the password, so I don't have it anymore. So I guess that wasn't my first $1 million.
Wow.
She's such
She's
an
making her next million out of jail.
Anyway, so that leaves about 15 million in circulation. Today we have 200,000. But if this were to actually like long-term go through and we were to accumulate more Bitcoin and let's say have like 5%, that would be equivalent of 1 million Bitcoin, which is really significant in what it means for like stabilizing the price of Bitcoin, having control, and like even being able to manipulate it. Because like in the past we have manipulated gold, and so it's like really not that far-fetched that we would do the same in a scenario like this.
Yeah, it'll also signal to like institutional traders that they can like also hold Bitcoin for a long time. And when large institutional traders or large institutional holders hold Bitcoin for long time horizons, that also increases the stability of Bitcoin in general. And so we might see less volatility in the currency. And this is similar to like gold in the past, where gold used to also have a lot of volatility. But as we started to establish reserves and ETFs around gold, gold's price started to be less volatile. And so there's reason to believe that this will happen to Bitcoin too.
It is crazy that we're putting like Bitcoin on the level of gold, because like our dollar was literally pegged to gold, and that's how important it was to our currency. So I agree, this will like increase price stability, but it's also like, honestly, I take back what I said earlier. I feel like it is really pro Bitcoin. Like I was trying to make a point that, because on one hand, I feel like it's like, we already had this Bitcoin, and so we like have to do something to address it in a meaningful way. But then like obviously when you think critically about it, it's like if you're hiring like a crypto czar.
I think the first step was like electing Trump, and then the second step was like hiring the crypto czar, and then the third step is this, right?
Crypto czar is insane that's like a real position in our government, and that it's David Sachs.
Yeah. Anyways,
That's why there's now a power vacuum in the tech podcast space.
Wait, have you listened to it? It's not the same without him. Not that I'm like a huge fan of the guy, but he does add something to it.
it's because he adds crazy takes, and then they kind of try to like debunk him a little bit, and then now
it's just like Chamath.
I do think there's like something to be said about like chemistry between people on a podcast.
yeah, like do we have
What are you
chemistry?
saying?
No, like I was gonna say, I feel like we have a good chemistry.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. Maya always like doesn't agree with things like that, but like she's like, I appreciate that you said it. Versus being like, I agree. Anyways, that's fine.
We've mentioned that they have this option of finding like budget neutral ways to buy Bitcoin, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, so the secretary has the power to essentially take, like, not buy more Bitcoin with money that the government doesn't have, but like sell other assets to then go buy Bitcoin. So this might be reducing like the gold asset stockpile to then go buy Bitcoin, or other asset sales like store cheese. Sorry, I just thought it was so funny that we like store cheese. And then the U.S. Treasury could issue a Bitcoin-backed bond that you can like buy, and that Bitcoin is like part of like the U.S. Reserve. So in general, it's all about not adding necessarily like more money to the government to buy Bitcoin, but like selling,
or like taking it from the taxpayer. Because I feel like that's the biggest concern. Is it's like, how does this affect me? Like, do I need to pay anything?
No, you're not like none of your taxpayer costs are going towards Bitcoin directly.
People were also concerned because they were like, with all the Doge cuts, does that mean they can just use that to buy Bitcoin? And the answer is no. David Sachs did debunk that and was like, none of that counts, because that's technically like getting at our deficit, and we're like going away from our deficit. So nothing that touches like our deficit, our taxpayers, anything like that would be considered a budget neutral way.
There is the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and it's a self-funded government entity, and they actually have a 40 billion surplus. So like analysts basically say that they could use this surplus to purchase Bitcoin.
There are also cons that people have talked about when it comes to creating a fund like that, like this. We went a little bit into the taxpayer thing, which is that people feel like taxpayers will have to pay money, which in the way that they ended up implementing it didn't happen. But there's still senators like Elizabeth Warren that say that this is a risk to taxpayers, because a lot of the people that are involved in this, like David Sachs, have conflicts of interest with like specific coins or crypto regulation in general.
Yeah, they're worried that the initiative may benefit like crypto elites rather than like actual fundamental economic changes.
The one thing is that Bitcoin has only been going down since the announcement of this. I think it's like at around 80K, at least when we're recording this, which is insane from what it was at like almost 110.
It is, but like also the market has been down, and I feel like it's difficult to just say like this got announced and then Bitcoin's going down, because like this announcement has been priced in starting and since the election, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's like correlated to each other. I'm just saying that everyone was like, as soon as this passes, Bitcoin's going to rally. Like that was the sentiment of what was going to happen. And so like for whatever reason, like whether it's the market going down or anything else, like all I'm trying to say is that like we haven't seen Bitcoin rally the way people expected it to.
We can no longer attribute like one Trump Bitcoin decision to like how Bitcoin's price performs, because like such a bullish Bitcoin price was priced in November. And then the other con that people have been discussing is around the idea of dollar hegemony, which is that the US has a lot of economic and political influence because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world that people use to like buy and sell things. We talk about this in the Coinbase episode, but one example I would give is like when we implemented sanctions on Venezuela, the country's like oil company basically was like having a really hard time selling any of their supply, because anytime you like sell a commodity like that globally, at some point you're going through a US bank, and we have the control to just like freeze those funds. So they started going through crypto, and that was like their way around it. And there's like a whole underbelly to the economy that the US government has been able to control historically and no longer can because of crypto.
Yeah. And so by the US government being like pro Bitcoin in this case, it's actually almost disrupting itself, because it's like signaling a lack of faith in the dollar system. And I think this is a little bit overblown, if I'm going to be honest. Like I do think that being pro Bitcoin does lead to, for example, like the dollar having less value, because now more companies are willing to also adopt maybe a strategic Bitcoin reserve themselves, because a lot of people pursue of like what the US government does. But at the same time, it's not like that this Bitcoin reserve is like any bigger right now. So I think it's just like what it unlocks and the sentiment.
Yeah, but I think it's also like the legitimacy, and it's like what you were saying before. Like a lot of the reason why Bitcoin hasn't been seen as super legitimate is because it doesn't have price stability, even though it operationally can work the way a dollar works. So once you unlock that price stability, there's like so many like funds and stuff that are probably going to add crypto that haven't before or invest in it more. And also like when countries are doing deals with each other, whether it's for oil or something else, I feel like now there's like way more credence to be like, we'll just do it in crypto.
There's like the option to do it in crypto.
Yeah.
I also do think though that that's the direction that the world is moving in. And so I think that if the United States didn't start having this conversation at like a governmental level, like I feel like in society people have been talking about Bitcoin for so long and have all of their own opinions on it, but I do think we need like regulation in some way coming from the top, because that is the direction that the world is moving in. Like the EU just announced that they're planning on having like a CBTC, and it's going to be out like in November. And so I think that's something that we also need to consider.
And a CBDC is basically like a digital currency pegged to your currency. So it's like the euro but digital, the dollar but digital. And it's like we have stable coins right now. So like Coinbase and Circle have a currency called USDC pegged to the dollar, and then Tether has USDT also pegged to the dollar, but neither of those are like an actual digital dollar. Obviously it's like 90% in bonds, 10% like gold and other stuff, and it's not controlled by the government, which is like a key piece of it. Like they make their own regulations of like how the money is circulated when it's frozen, versus like in the case of like a digital euro, the European government would do it, which is like increases legitimacy, but then undermines a lot of the principles around crypto, which is that it's like the whole point is that it's decentralized.
I think it's possible that the US could be pro crypto, but then be pro crypto in its own incentives by being pro its own stablecoin that they release. And so this is something that like Jerome Powell and the Fed in general have explored, is like, what if we issued a CBDC that's our own stablecoin? Would that work? And they were like in the process of studying it, and they were like trying to see whether or not it would be effective, because a lot of other countries are going after this. And basically in a previous executive order, Trump essentially bans the existence.
Trump just axed it. I swear, just because Trump hates Jay Powell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Trump just wants to like use his executive orders as a way to control the Fed, and whether or not he can, I don't know, but like again, time will tell. But in this executive order, he basically says you cannot go after something like this, and then he goes and says, okay, I'm going to go make a new executive order around the crypto space to talk about like Bitcoin reserves and stuff, and then comes out with this. And it's kind of like weird, because it would be in the US government's incentive to like adopt a stable coin that they own, rather than establish like this Bitcoin reserve to like increase stability in Bitcoin. And so Trump's executive order kind of goes against the US government incentive and just kind of goes for his own incentive.
I think it's like to Priya's point, or to what we talked about in the Coinbase episode, where like, for example, like Coinbase adopted, like they've started integrating with decentralized exchanges, even though they are a centralized exchange, and that's cannibalizing their own growth. And it's kind of a similar parallel where it's like the US government investing in crypto or prioritizing it is going to cannibalize dollar hegemony, but like dollar hegemony is already being cannibalized. And transparently, I feel like dollar hegemony is something I need to like read more about, and monetary policy is pretty complicated, so I don't have like a total answer as to what would be like best case scenario. But I feel like we can all agree that it's like good that we're auditing the Bitcoin that we already have, but like where I get some pause with this whole thing is like kind of the people running it and how many conflicts of interest they have with like their own personal investments.
Yeah, that's a big criticism in general, is that, I mean, Trump just launched a meme coin, right?
Yeah.
So
it's like, it's not really a problem with this policy, and this policy might even be a good thing. It's like this policy in the context of everything else makes me think that they're not like the right people to do it. But unfortunately, they're the only people that would do it, because it's like Biden's not going to create like an audit of our 200,000 Bitcoin or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and I think like when we talk about conflicts of interest, that's also where the digital asset stockpile comes up, which is like the separate stockpile of like other coins, because David Sachs is the crypto czar, and a lot of the coins that were decided on putting in this, like Ethereum, Solana, XRP, are like all coins that he was personally invested in, and he did sell all of his holdings to like seem more neutral. But I don't think like everyone that's working on this hasn't sold what they have of it, right?
Yeah, they haven't. And when he was asked about it, he was like, I can't speak on behalf of others. But he was like, I sold it all myself. So he's trying to stay out of trouble. But yeah, like with the digital asset stockpile, it's basically like a managed portfolio of these coins. And so they're allowed to like buy, sell, stake, like do literally whatever they want, which would significantly influence what happens to them.
It's crazy that like as an investment banking intern, I wasn't allowed to buy Apple stock, but like the people deciding crypto policy can have like Solana and then decide that Solana is the coin that like the US government buys.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps up the Bitcoin reserve. I feel like this is a story that will keep developing as Trump's crypto policy develops and the SEC's approach to crypto develops as well, because I'm sure there'll be like big news coming there soon too in terms of how they approach regulating different coins. But with that, we're moving on to the last segment of the episode. Now on to Maya's favorite segment of the pod, companies that would not get our check. This week's company is really spicy. It's Lucy Go, who's one of the founders of Scale AI, although she's no longer a part of the company called Passes. It's a direct-to-fan monetization platform. So think like OnlyFans, except they also allow minors on it because they allow creators under 18. They raised a $40 million Series A funding round, and they're now getting sued by one of their creators, Alice Rosenbaum. So the platform does not allow any nudity on it, technically, but one of their creators that was underage at the time of like most of the money she made is now overage and not a part of the platform, is suing them for basically child distribution, which is insane.
I think it's so crazy that the one-liner that everyone uses to describe Passes is like, it's basically OnlyFans for kids. And so it's like
crazy.
It's not even like debatable what this thing is, which is so frustrating. Like it's actually just so frustrating that we live in a world that someone could start a company like that.
Yeah, basically
and get like tier 1 VCs on board too.
Is it a tier 1 VC?
Or sorry, Menlo Ventures is on it.
Oh,
so like
what?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Lucy.
So basically the way, if you're wondering like why would VC fund this, the way they marketed it is it's while they allow creators under 18, they don't allow any nudity, and it's not actually supposed to be like a OnlyFans. It's supposed to be like a way for creators to get more of a take rate out of the subscriptions that they have. So
it's like Patreon.
Yeah.
Which like OnlyFans also like originally wasn't intended to be like what it's become today. Like all of these different platforms are basically like subscription-based content platforms. It's like YouTube, but you like get way more money from it. And like Lucy always on her Twitter was like, oh, like look at all these people. They used to be nurses and now they're making millions of dollars. Like that was her big thing.
Yeah,
on
she
Twitter.
would be like, oh, like 5 out of 40 are already making 6 figures. Like it's going to be 7 by the end of the year. Like she talk a lot about how like they're allowing creators to like make their own money.
It's like a good thing that we want to promote people that are like making the content to also have a higher take rate. But basically like where it differs from like other subscription-based content apps is because they allow kids 15 to 18 to join with parental consent.
And basically Alice Rosenbaum, who is the person that has this whole lawsuit against the company now, is saying they distributed pictures of her, and then Passes was like, oh, but she's not nude. So then like at first I was like, oh, maybe it's like a gray area where it's like a 17-year-old in a bikini and like someone could say that's provocative, but another person, like, I mean, 17-year-olds post them. I've posted myself in a bikini at 17, right? It's like people do that. Then I saw like the actual screenshots of this platform and my mouth literally dropped. It's like 4 pictures of like this 16-year-old topless for $200. Like that's not even suggestive.
Yeah.
Or it'll be called like I don't even know if we can like say these things on the podcast. Lucy says like, I didn't know about any of this. I wasn't involved. But basically employees at Passes were critical people in like getting this content distributed. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has to do with selling messages to whales on the platform, which are like basically the men that spend the most amount of money in DMs to like get these photos, similar to OnlyFans, but these are minors. And they basically had a talent agent. The key one that's brought up a lot in this case is called Celestin, I think. Mm-hmm. And he got like minors to earn like $47,000 out of one conversation by the photos he was sending. And Lucy's defense here is that he was like an independent contractor, which is a crazy rebranding of like basically a pimp.
Yeah.
But yeah, she also says she like cut him off a long time ago, even though there's like messages of them talking in January, and there's all these social media posts where like he posts with her, and like after they raised their Series A, he literally posted and was like, the company is younger and hotter than ever before, and like he used the word younger.
Insane. Yeah, the other weird thing with like that specific scenario is like apparently he was called a talent manager, and like because he was a talent manager, like any platform, Passes has like some version of content moderation in which like Lucy Lucy admitted that they have like ML classifiers, but she literally said ML classifiers didn't catch this because he was marked as a talent manager, so we trusted him.
Yeah, you'd think after founding Scale AI, girl would understand the basics of data labeling. Like she just turned it off.
Yeah, and it's like, obviously, like, any person building a business like this, if you have minors on your platform, like children are like what we need to protect the most.
Yeah.
And like, sure, maybe it's expensive to run these ML classifiers, but you leave those on for like every person under 18 on your platform at a minimum.
Yeah, and then basically like there's a Forbes article that's like, obviously you would have all these precautions in place unless like if it wasn't for the underage girls' pictures you're selling, your company wouldn't be making any money, because there's screenshots of like the leaderboard of the 3 creators on passes that were making the most money. It's all underage girls selling like basically suggestive to nude photos, which makes sense. And then like beyond the ML stuff, there was also this whole thing of like parental consent. Like if you're a minor, you need parental consent, and like your parents should be notified if there's anything suspicious. But then Lucy was like, oh, like I guess people just like signed up with IDs of like their parents or someone else over 18, and there's like nothing I could have done.
I want to bring up also another story in the context of the lawsuit, which is like the 18th birthday campaign. So basically the plaintiff in the lawsuit, which is the 17-year-old girl at the time when she like joined Passes, had been recruited by Celestin, and they had done a photo shoot at the time of her joining at 17, and the photo shoot was of these suggested, like very suggestive pics. So he like knew that was happening, and like I think Guo was like aware of this photo shoot as well.
I'm sure.
Well, Guo was out here taking photos with Bella Thorne.
Yeah,
Like,
obviously. And then on the 18th birthday, like they post these pictures, and they like have a campaign where it's called like Alice's tip menu. You can like request sexting for like $10 or $100 or whatever, a stripping video or a booty bundle or whatever. And so this is like basically because she like turned 18, like they now have access to like more content.
But the photos are from when she was 17.
Yeah, the photos are when she was 17. And they were at this photo shoot. Lucy wasn't there, but Celestin and Ginoza were there, which are the two like people that like worked with the plaintiff to like get her to like be a better creator on the platform, whatever better creator means, right?
Well, there's also like a bunch of screenshots of Lucy messaging people like incessantly to be like, I need you to post like XYZ on my platform.
Of course, everything we're saying is just alleged based on the lawsuit and the articles we've read.
Alleged is like crazy though. And then on top of it, like they had a seed investment, and then obviously investors like again raised another round for $40 million for the Series A.
They raised $40 million in 2024.
Yeah, and by then the platform had clearly gained like enough money and like product market fit. I'm sorry, like product market fit is like a crazy term to be using for like essentially a child website. But like obviously like the investors like knew that they were making money off of these kids, which like it's not even just Lucy.
That's actually what I want to talk about too.
Yeah.
Because like I think like obviously this is like horrible. We all agree what she did is insane, but it's like, how did no one else say anything? Because the only reason why people are talking about it right now is not because it like came to light necessarily. It's because there's a lawsuit and the plaintiff has like collected all this evidence. But there's an article from, I believe, let me just make sure I have my date right, but yeah, it's from July 2023, talking about Fan House getting acquired by Passes. And I want to talk about that because this TechCrunch article literally outlines like so many problematic things. And like I read it, and like the fact that a public TechCrunch article that any investor, it'd be the first thing that comes up when you Google this company, and then they like invested in it. But I guess to back up like the TechCrunch article, so there's this girl, Jasmine Rice Girl, and she has like a big following on Twitter, and I've actually followed her for a long time, like outside of this. And I believe she was like she would post like nudes and stuff, and people would pay her for it. But she was also like a student at Penn, and her whole like thing on Twitter was like, I'm first generation, I'm paying like in an empowered way for my own education, and like everything she was doing was legal. Then like her and 2 other people start Fan House, which is a way, it's like kind of like an ethical OnlyFans, but like I don't think it's just nudity. Like similar to OnlyFans, you can post anything. So then Passes wants to acquire it because they need creators, right? And they need like some way to grow their original base. And Jasmine, or like Rosie Nguyen, is like, tells her co-founders, I don't think we should sell to Passes. It's like so unethical. And they're like, no, we're going to do it. And then a TechCrunch article comes out where she says she takes no exit or severance from her own company
because she's like so against what they're doing, right?
How crazy is that?
No, that is crazy. No, but
that's co-founder doesn't take an exit from their own company.
No, but that's what I'm saying. The whole thing is crazy, and like the fact that they're like reasonable adult. I mean, not reasonable adults, obviously, but that are doubling down and being like, oh my god, like, oh, clearly you're making money from this platform. Like, there's creators on this platform. Yeah, sure, I'll give you $40 million. Aren't you thinking like, why are these creators like making money? Like, I think not only Guo should be sued, but also any of the investors at the company, like who invested.
It's like, what were you doing?
Yeah, it's.
But what the sad part, I guess, is like what Jasmine Rice Girl says in this TechCrunch article, which by the way is 2 years old, is she says that she basically says Passes has no content guidelines. And then Lucy Go says, quote, "We do have content guidelines. It's just more lax." And then she goes, "We have high risk credit card processing. So even though we don't allow any nudity on our site, if we were to do it, it's allowed. The credit card processors are okay with it." And she says this in a TechCrunch article from 2 years ago. And then the Jasmine Rice Girl basically says like the reason why Passes is so messed up is because it's like backed by VCs that are pressuring them to like show more and more revenue. And this is like the way they're finding to do it. So like her argument is like, it's not like, how did VC turn a blind eye to this? It's like VC fueled this entire thing to begin with. Like, I guess they've just tapped out of every market and they're like, what TAM have we not penetrated yet?
Yeah, and I would like to say their names in the Series A. The funding was led by Bond, which is a San Francisco VC firm, and also had participation from Abstract Ventures, Crossbeam Ventures, which is Michael Orbit's fund, Emma and Jen's Greed, who are the founders are.
Oh my god, Emma
Skims.
Greed.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with her.
Yeah. Like
she's on Shark Tank like all the time.
So they're very high profile angels, and they were the founders of Skims, and so they also invested. Paris Hilton, Jake Paul, Joe Montana.
I saw that Jake Paul invested in it.
I see it's on brand for Jake Paul, but like, what? Like, why are we allowing
have
this?
any of them made like statements about this?
Because
I
haven't seen anything.
Yeah, because they're trying to sweep it under the rug. But this is literally like
wait, someone needs to go to jail. Like, there's no way no one goes to jail.
Well, I think it's because like the media is also being flooded by like Trump headlines and everything happening with all the executive orders. But like this has been a problem for so long, and like not enough people are talking about it. And also, they're all flaming Lucy, but they should be flaming everybody else involved in it too.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, of course we would never invest, but.
No, like if you look at the screenshots, it really is like the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
We don't even need to go into the financials of this like story. Like it's
Well, basically what the financials are is that like, okay, so when FanHouse sells to Passes, right? Passes says that they're offering creators 95% of the money they make, and then over time they'll decrease it to 90%. And that take rate is like way higher than industry standard. I'm not sure what OnlyFans is, but I know it's lower than that. And FanHouse was created to be ethical, and they're only doing like 90%. And I imagine like that 10% margin is like already probably too low to have a sustainable business model. And then in order to get people, Passes is like upping that to 95%. So basically like their margins were like nothing. It's like 5%.
Yeah.
And that's just like not a take rate that's going to work. And the way that they compensated for that was by like finding content that you can't find anywhere else.
I wonder if like when Lucy started this, if she was like, yes, I'm going to start basically a child porn website, or if she was like, I'm going to start that. Like if internally she thought that this is what it was going to turn into. Like, I have to believe that, like, if I think that I'm going to make a monetary platform for kids, like, red flags, right?
But I feel like it's not like it's like for kids. Like, it's like 15 to 17, like with parental consent. Like, I actually think that like there's been like so many new laws in California where it's like if you're a mom that's like including your kids in videos, you need to like put money away from them. And I think there's scenarios where like parents don't have the best intentions. And so like maybe it is positive that like children that are creating content like 15 to 17 like should be getting paid out, because like the creator age is only getting younger and younger. And like obviously I don't know what Lucy's intention here was, but like I see what she was like trying to do.
It's complicated, and it's like you like there is content a 15-year-old girl can make that's like not harming her.
Yeah, like it's like makeup. I mean, it's like any YouTuber.
Like
most YouTubers were all like 14 when they started.
True.
You know that better than anyone, Maya.
Maya loved her YouTube.
Maya loved her YouTubers.
I really like YouTube.
But I do think that there was probably a point at which she was like trying to find how to monetize from it, and that was the way forward. And I think that's the point at which you're like, you need to put your foot down and be like,
no, I'm not.
Nothing else matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, if you're like thinking that she has like the best intentions, which like based on all of this, like she clearly doesn't. But I think like the initial idea probably wasn't like, let's make a child website. It was probably, let's make this website, and it quickly turned into that.
I think it's just like you see what makes money and then you follow that. And that's the entire point, like the Jasmine Rice Girl was making too, which is like VCs will like see the one thing making money and then be like, oh, you need to like 10x that, and then like all the focus goes there, and then the interests of the creators aren't prioritized. I don't know. Props to her for like saying this for the last 2 years and like actually like putting her money where where her mouth is. And I feel like even her tweet explaining the whole thing had something like 4,000 likes, and like for something of this gravity of like this former Scale founder creating something like this, I feel like this should be like a headline in the tech industry.
Yeah.
To me. But that wraps up today's episode. We hope you enjoyed, and we will be back next week with an interview with the CPO of Carta.
Bye.
Bye.